Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today we are in Detroit, and we're going to talk about the path of stardom, or the path to stardom, for one of the biggest actors in the 80s. He was once called the most attractive man in the world. We're going to talk a little bit about the story of the great Tom Selleck. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. Tom ended up being born and starting his life right across from this elementary school, but he would never actually attend it. He would start his life on this little street here, this quiet little community, nice little houses. Yes, the great Tom Selleck, Magnum PI. When I was a kid, my grandmother loved Tom Selleck. She would not miss Magnum. And in fact, when I would go over swimming at her house, I would use a Magnum PI beach towel. So I saw a lot of Tom Selleck growing up, and I've been a fan forever. And when I started reading his new book, I was really amazed at the path to stardom he had. And it all started here in Detroit. His parents met in Detroit and got married, and his father was in the service when Tom was born here. We're gonna go over to his childhood home now, and we're gonna talk about why he would wear that Detroit Tigers hat in Magnum PI. So here we are. Tom Selleck lived and was born into this White House in front of us, and lived here until he was 4 years old, when his father got out of the service and moved the family out to Los Angeles, which is where his career would really take off. But those first 4 years, believe it or not, his Uncle Fife would take him to Tigers games. And so Tom always had a love for the Tigers and baseball. His older brother, actually right out of high school, got drafted by the Dodgers and was in their system for a couple of years. But Tom's path was a little different. Tom didn't really know what he wanted to do. He was a good athlete. He looked exactly, people said, a spitting image of his father. And his father was in business, so Tom just kind of assumed he would always go into business. When he was in high school, he played baseball and basketball, but he didn't really have his growth spurt until later, so he wasn't a big basketball player during those days. It wasn't until right at the end of high school he started really developing and ended up going to USC. Now, when he went to USC, he eventually got a walk-on scholarship with the basketball team. So he wasn't a starter, but when they would have big games and things like that, he would be part of the practice squad, and he was on the team and things like that. So when Tom was going to college, he said he just absolutely loved frat life. He said it was just one of those last bastions of being a kid and being wild, and he just, you know, being part of the basketball team, they would practice in the afternoon, so he had to have morning classes, and he wanted to sleep. So he said he developed this habit of just not going to class, waking up, meeting up with his friends over at the chow hall, and then going to basketball practice. And so he didn't really, even though he had got a walk-on scholarship, he did have to keep his grades up enough to maintain it. So even though he was a bad student, he said he had basically loaded up all of his courses, because he was majoring in business, to have all the easy classes first. So he had went through all the easy classes and now was at the hard classes and just was not doing well. So he said there was kind of a little scam that his friends had going, where the dating game would actually have auditions. And so what he said he and his friends were doing was, the ones that were couples would go and audition separately. They knew somebody in the casting department. They would get cast, and then they would have one of their friends sit in the audience and let them know which one was like their boyfriend, so the girl could pick her boyfriend. And then they would basically win a free trip on the TV show. And that's how basically they, you know, they would date when they didn't have any money. So Tom decided to go on the show. And he said he wasn't funny, he was extremely nervous and everything, and he didn't get picked.
As we meet our first 3 eligible bachelors, and here they are. Stand Standing 6'4", it's reasonable and correct to surmise that bachelor number 2 is an outstanding varsity basketball player. He plans to enter the world of business along administrative lines. He's from Detroit, Michigan. We'd like you to meet Tom Selleck. Good luck, Tom.
Number 3, promise me something that nobody's ever promised me before.
I promise to fall in love with you if you pick me, for sure.
Oh, that's a bargain.
But someone saw him. He had basically, while he was trying to get his grades up, he took a theater history course with USC, and he said it was actually a really interesting course and it was a really easy course, but his teacher said, hey, I think, you have a look. If you want me to put you in touch with an agent, I will. So he did, and almost immediately that guy got him an Air Force recruiting film. So he goes and he films that. He said he was totally green. He had no idea what he was doing. And he said almost immediately after that, he gets an audition for a Pepsi commercial. And the Pepsi commercial is for a basketball player. And of course, he was a, pretty good basketball player, even though he wasn't varsity or anything. So he got the Pepsi commercial. That made him union. And all of a sudden, his agent, this guy who was kind of acting as his agent, calls 20th Century Fox and tells them that he has this budding new star that they should meet. And so they say, okay, we'll meet him. So then the guy calls Universal and tells them, hey, I got a guy here that's going to get signed by 20th Century Fox. You better meet him before Tuesday when he signs. Okay, yeah, we want to meet him. So they get this bidding war when he's only done 2 projects. He's never done any kind of acting classes or anything like that. And he ends up, basically he had never auditioned. So his agent has to hire a girl to teach him how to audition. So he learns the play Barefoot in the Park. But when he goes in to perform for 20th Century Fox, instead of doing a fake phone call, he actually picks up the phone, hears the receiver dial tone, and he gets stage fright and forgets all of his lines. So he basically flubs up the whole audition, and the whole reason this was a big deal was because 20th Century Fox at the time was going to, or had just brought back their studio program where they would find people that they thought had a look or maybe potential talent, but were very green, and they would offer them a contract and then put them in classes like the old studio system where they would learn how to dance and sing and act and think like an actor, scene study, all that stuff. So he does this horrible audition for 20th Century Fox, and they say, well, let's go meet the president. So they walk him into the president's office. They say, yeah, he's pretty green. He's not that good, but I think he's got potential. And Tom Selleck said the head of the network, the head of 20th Century Fox, keeps looking at my resume, which only had 2 things on it. And I didn't know why he kept looking at it, but finally he says, oh, you're a USC guy, huh? I'm a UCLA guy. And he goes, oh, all of a sudden the rivalry became part of it. The famous USC-UCLA rivalry. And the head of the network, Xanax, says, oh, sorry to see you're with USC. And Tom Selleck said, well, better than UCLA. And they kind of have a banter going back and forth. And all of a sudden, Xanax says, what the heck, let's give him a shot. So for the next 1.5 to 2 years, Tom Selleck was in Fox program, 20th Century Fox, where he would learn how to do all the acting. And basically what they said was they would get you prepared for an audition in the hopes that you would get the parts and that their own home birth talent would be in their movies. But he said the whole time he was there for that 2 years, he never booked anything when they sent him out for auditions or anything. And he said actually because he accepted that contract with them where he was making $100 a week, he had to leave school. And because it was the 60s when he left school, that made him eligible for the draft. So he ended up choosing to go into the National Guard. And he said it was actually really good for him because he had never been a good student, never, really applied himself. But in the military, he did. And he really enjoyed his time. So he would split his time between the National Guard and being an actor. Now, he said right around the 2-year mark, they decided to abolish the program and just get rid of the studio program altogether, which made him not have a job anymore. But he said he got an audition for Lancer, a Western show, and he got it. He said the only reason anybody knows Lancer at all anymore is because Quentin Tarantino depicted Rick Dalton being on the show in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But then he said shortly thereafter, like a week later, he got a call that Mae West wanted to see him. And so he went to an audition in Mae West's office. She looked him up and down, liked him, and then he got another call and they said she wants you to come to her apartment. So he goes to her apartment at the Ravenswood, and he says she tells him to stand between her legs and like kind of like inch his legs apart, and he thought it was like something kind of like provocative because he was a huge fan of her. Even though he said she made her last movie before he was born, he had seen all of her movies and was a huge fan, and this was for Myra Breckinridge. And so he said that he's at her house, he thinks this is something kind of sexual, and she has a friend in the room, like an assistant in the room, and he says, no, I think that'll work. And then he all of a sudden realizes that Mae was very short and that she wanted to make sure that she looked good next to Tom if he got cast. And so she had asked him to spread his legs so that he could be a little bit shorter. And so Tom Selleck was picked for the part, and he had a pretty funny story about filming Myra Breckinridge. He got hired as a day player, but they told him the first day, we're probably not going to use you until the second or third day, but he said that turned into 2 weeks. So he kept getting paid all that time. Then when they finally needed him, he said that they told him to pick out his favorite suit and to get ready and get dressed. So he did, but the suit that he picked was more of a fall suit, and he said with all the hot lights and everything as they were setting up the scene under the hot lights, he started to sweat profusely. And then he said they filmed his scene, and then they went in to film a second scene and in the casting office, and he's supposed to take his jacket off, and his shirt was just completely soaked all the way through. But he said he filmed the part, she seemed happy with it and everything, and it's not a big part. He said he was like, you know, was named like handsome guy or hunk number 4, but he said his part was basically to go in and she would seduce him, and the scene would end with him dropping his resume and her clothes falling to the floor and things like that. But he said what was really interesting was that she had a friend who told him, you know, hey, this is a big deal. Like, when you go to the premiere, I can get you a pass to the premiere and stuff. You need to show up in a limo and look like somebody. And then Mae West wanted to promote the movie in her own way, so she invited him out to dinner at Chasen's, knowing that the media would see her with this much younger guy. And then when she did a media tour talking about making the movie, they were asking her about her discovering Cary Grant, and she said, yeah, Cary was great and everything, but wait till you see Tom Selleck. And, you know, hey, that helped a lot. So he said the next few years weren't easy, but that kind of solidified him knowing that his future was not in business, and that he was, you know, people were telling him he had something. He said, next thing I knew, I was a hygiene man. He said, for several years, I was making commercials where they always wanted my teeth.
$150. Impressive. Now try close-up. Put your money where your mouth is. Whiter teeth and fresh breath will win points with Shelley. For your breath.
Does it whiten your teeth?
White as they can be.
And then, of course, we know he became Magnum P.I. The guy has had an absolutely amazing career, and I read online a story about, you know, when I was finding this house, there were all kinds of people commenting that knew either his family from growing up or knew him, and said he came back here very frequently to visit his family members throughout his life until, you know, many of them died out. So hope you guys enjoyed this vlog, getting to see a little bit of Tom Selleck's history and finding out how he got his start. We will see you all next time from Detroit, Michigan. Have a great night and goodbye.